before we get started, we invite you all to, we are providing interpretation for this event. So we invite you all to select your preferred language. So this event is available in English or French by clicking the interpretation globe at the bottom of your Zoom window. You can select either of those. The webinar is being recorded and it will be shared with everyone who registered. Also today, we'll be using a platform called AHA Slides. So please join us using the link that is being shared in the chat. So again, everyone, welcome. Thank you for joining us for this first event in the series on HDP coherence and practice, insights from the implementing community. My name is Suzanne Amari, and I'm acting director for the IDEAL activity, and I'll be monitoring this session, moderating this session. So for those of you who are not familiar with IDEAL, IDEAL stands for Implementer-Led Design Evidence Analysis, Design Evidence Analysis and Learning. As you can see on the slide, IDEAL is a learning activity funded by USAID's Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance, or BHA. And IDEAL aims to strengthen humanitarian development and resilience food security activities by focusing on foundational skills that enable effective programming, such as adaptive management, data for decision-making, and HDP coherence. So we do this by providing peer-to-peer learning opportunities for implementers to hear from each other, including hosting knowledge sharing events and supporting a variety of peer communities of practice. We provide training and access to tools and other resources to help implementers strengthen their activities. We manage a small grants program that provides funding for research, learning, innovation, and new initiatives. We provide opportunities for implementers and BHA to engage with one another on issues that are affecting food security activities. And lastly, we manage and host the Food Security and Nutrition Network website and newsletter. So this webinar series is called HDP Coherence and Practice, Insights from the Implementing Community. What do we mean by HDP coherence? In early 2022, USAID released Programming Considerations for Humanitarian-Development-Peace Coherence, a note for implementing partners. In that document, HDP coherence is defined as approaches that promote complementarity and collaboration across humanitarian development and peace actors in pursuit of a common agenda to maximize impact and sustainability and reduce the need for humanitarian assistance over time. So, in other words, HDP coherence is about getting out of our silos and working together to meet longer-term food security and resilient needs, to address emergency needs caused by shock, and to reduce vulnerability. The document presents USAID's core principles on HDP coherence that guide this work. As you can see on the slide, it includes concepts we all recognize, including respecting humanitarian principles, planning jointly toward a common agenda, communication and coordination, sequencing, layering, and integration, shock responsive programming and adaptive management, conflict integration, and programming with, by, and through local partners. While the concept of the nexus or HDP coherence isn't new, today's unprecedented and compounded shocks and stresses in an increasingly complex and interdependent world make it even more urgent for all of us to move past silos to more holistic and connected approaches. So whether you've called it HDP coherence or not, I'm sure many of you have worked to collaborate across sectors and different pillars of assistance, shared data and lessons learned, adapted based on input, and more. So I invite you to go onto AHA Slides, and we'll share that link in the chat again, and share in one word what you think is an important thing to consider in working towards HDP coherence. We'll give a minute for people to start inputting. Trust. That's great. Inclusion, preparation. Common vision. Transparency. Coordination. If you aren't able to get on AHA Slides, I invite you to write your word in the chat. Collaboration, cross-collaboration. Seeing collaboration and coordination being very important. Accountability. These are really great and really resonate with what we've been experiencing as we've been working to develop for the past 10 years or 2 years, sorry, to develop our own common understanding of HDP coherence. And we're looking to really increase the use of HDP approaches in food security programming by illustrating what HDP approaches look like in practice. And throughout this 4-month series, we'll share studies and lessons from that work. But these are really resonating with the work that we've been doing. I look forward to you all joining us as we continue this journey. So that's great. Flexibility coming up also strongly there. Wonderful. Well, today we'll be hearing, we'll leave this there and you can continue to put your words in, but today what we'll be hearing about are some of the key learnings that resulted from the Greater Horn of Africa Regional Knowledge Sharing Meeting, or RKSM, on HDP coherence. That event, convened by USAID and IGAD in collaboration with IDEAL and the Resilience Learning Activity, or RLA, took place in Kenya in May 2023. Around 200 stakeholders from the region came together to discuss opportunities for and challenges to HDP coherence through plenary panels and interactive thematic and country-based sessions. And before we hear more about the RKSM from our panelists today, I want to share this short video.
When your country is presenting, we're going to ask you to stand.
Having partners coming together, both implementing and still funding partners and the government representatives, to discuss how we can effectively integrate these elements, humanitarian work, development, and peace.
Deliberately sequencing, layering, and integrating our activities as partners, together with the government counterparts, together with private sectors, all the different stakeholders within our country, in our regions, for collective impact.
USAID has made a huge commitment to HDP, Humanitarian Development and Peace Coherence, meeting in the region with our partners, with local governments, with national governments. So the commitments at the capital are made real in the region.
People that we are always interacting with, but for the first time coming to a face-to-face conversation that you don't get in all those Zoom calls, Teams calls. This is the first time we are actually having a deep conversation.
It's a team effort, including the participants themselves, not just only the activity implementers.
We are facilitating communities to be able to develop their own resilience agendas.
Positive perception towards local knowledge. Are they able? Do they have the capacity? Do they know it? So can we have trust building processes?
Intentional allocation and centering of local knowledge and resources is quite critical. So right now we are going to redesign the programming to involve every stakeholder along the value chain.
We agreed that for joint action planning to be effective, there is need for commitment There's need for political will, and there's need for collective action towards that common goal.
So when we talk about peace, our goal is how do we help our team, our staff, our field agents to have that lens as they work with the community.
We tend to see our donors also have a very siloed view of their role in intervening. So for example, you'd see that those who are humanitarians are exclusively humanitarian. Those who are development are exclusively development. So I'm looking forward to a time when there's actually a marriage of the three elements. So it's not just lip service, it's actually seeing a genuine interconnectedness.
When we realize the importance of the interconnectedness between the humanitarian development and peace coherence, and also how the pastoralists or the communities are rational actors, then it enables us to act appropriately and to support them as adequately as possible.
Why not have a joint risk-informed vulnerability assessment tool that we can all pick from each other?
We've heard a lot of important recommendations, a lot of important gaps that we need at DC level to address and take action on.
Using the inclusion lens, making sure that no one is left behind. Nothing for me without me.
The P should be prioritized, because without the P, the H and D are not very feasible. And so hence, PHD coherence. Thank you.
Engaging.
L'apprentissage.
I will use enlighten. Renew.
L'adaptation. Informative.
I am relieved.
Marvelous.
Coherent.
Excited.
Well, I am excited to introduce our wonderful panel. Moderating our discussion today is the incredible RKSM Master of Ceremony, Dr. Joshua Wathanga. Dr. Wathanga is an independent consultant in public policy, strategy, and resilience with more than 30 years of experience supporting multilateral, bilateral, and international organizations to achieve successful institutional transformation and impact. Our panelists are Fernando Kizitu Muhindo, Market System Development Manager for Mercy Corps' Partnership for Development of Eastern Congo, funded by USAID. Naomi Ayat Oyaro is the Uganda Country Advisor to Charter for Change and Executive Director of CAPAIDS Uganda. James Arike is Senior Program Management Specialist with USAID South Sudan's Office of Humanitarian Assistance. We're also joined by Dr. Dereje Wajira, Director of the IGAD Center for Pastoral Areas and Livestock Development. Joshua, over to you.
Thank you so much, Suzanne, and it's so wonderful to see so many people joining us and reliving the RKSM. And so glad to have these panelists and privileged to ask them questions. And Fernando, let me start with you. During the RKSM, you were a panelist. It was in a session about integrating conflict sensitivity into food security programs. And if you can speak about how that program you work on, PDEC, the Partnership for the Development of Eastern Congo, how you are working to build peace and address community empowerment without triggering tension and conflict. If you can speak to us briefly about that, we'll be delighted.
Thanks, Joshua, for the floor. Actually, I'm based in DRC. I work for Mercy Corps, as said before. For Mercy Corps, throughout the Partnership for Development of Eastern Congo, we work as a program of sustainability. Actually, PDEC is not a food security program. PDEC is a program that's working on sustainability throughout stabilization. So our way of working is seeing how we are driving resilience for local population. PDEC aims to resolve conflict drivers in DRC, and there are a lot of conflict drivers in DRC, especially access and control on resources, natural resources, mining resources, the drivers related to all that are specialists in governance and all the manipulation of population. So PDEC is trying to resolve conflicts throughout three results. The first result is by holding dialogues, and throughout dialogues with community, we want to solve peacefully problems. The second result for PDEC is to work to strengthen decentralization, territory entities, like for good governance. We work on developing local development plans, and we also work with local CBOs or community-based organization to drive on accountability. The third result is working on economic growth throughout economical techniques by involving cooperative to work on fertilizers like agriculture and all that's related to coffee, maize, and cocoa for food security in DRC. We aim to work with 8 international organizations that are generally working together with private sector actors, and we are really seeing conflict sensitivity in all our approaches. Thanks, Joshua.
Sorry, Joshua. Yeah, you're muted.
Sorry about that. As I ask you the next question, just to remind our audience that we'll be having a time for Q&A questions at the end. So if you can note any questions you would be interested to get answers from the panelists, we'll be giving an opportunity later. Fernando, one more question. You, of course, you are at the RKSM. If you can tell us about some of the things you learned through the sessions and from peer participants at the RKSM, and how you have applied them to PDEC programming since we were together last May.
Well, Joshua, the RKSM was a great session through which we learned a lot of things based on not only humanitarian development and peace principles, but we also learned a lot about localization. For me, localization was a great concept that I learned throughout the RKSM session, but also the common agenda throughout the principle of HDP coherence. Throughout these two specific concepts, I really understood that crisis is the best way for us to make sure that we can adapt. We can say, hey, stop, are we on the good track? So throughout crisis, I learned that it's really possible for us to adapt, adopt, and change. Something that I came with, like a takeaway from the RKSM, was how we can layer all the activities that we are doing on conflict sensitivity and resolution in DRC. Before joining the RKSM, we were working on an early warning system on conflict resolution and an early warning response in DRC. The approach that we were using was like not sustainable, but throughout the RKSM, we understood that we can layer this with a new concept, the crisis modifier concept that we learned from other colleagues from Somalia, other colleagues from Central Africa. We really learned a lot, and we came here in DRC to see how we can redesign our program of early warning system and early warning response for conflict sensitivity and responses. And now we are trying to adapt based on the lesson learned from the RKSM, how we can layer all the crisis modifier to our program and how we can adapt it to the context of DRC. It's a long way to go, but we are on a good track. Throughout localization, we are also emphasizing on common agenda with international organization, working on coffee, and we are working on a shade-grown coherence program that will make sure that we are not duplicating action within the coffee and cocoa value chain, but we are working on a common agenda with all the international organizations like ITA, International Institute Tropical Agriculture, like Ricolto, like Wild Reserve Conservation Society. So this, in terms of localization, we are trying now to drive our intervention to the poor in the communities. Thanks a lot, Joshua. Over.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. Naomi, let me come to you now, and good to see you again. Now, you are the chairperson of the Charter for Change in Uganda. It's a framework held by your organization, CAPIDS Uganda, and working for the localization of aid. So let me ask you this question. Why is the role of local partners so important for HDP coherence? And how is a Charter for Change working to make localization happen in reality? Looking forward to what you share with us, Naomi.
Thank you, Dr. Joshua, and thank you to all the listeners. Charter for Change is a global framework to operationalize aid commitments that various signatories, who are in this case maybe the donor community or the international non-government organizations, agreed to implement to address the imbalances and the inequalities in the global. We started with humanitarian, but the RKSM meeting is saying it is clear that we should go beyond humanitarian and address the imbalances in both humanitarian development and peace nexus programming. And the Ugandan chapter has taken on these because we need to demand for accountability of the various people who signed up to it. But much as we should demand for the accountability, it's also important to ensure that we prepare the local and national actors to be fit for the purpose as we build the trust and we create opportunities for them to be better stewards in advancing HDP programming. So it's very important for us because, one, we are holding, there's so many commitments that have been done towards the localization agenda, but to what degree have we moved from policies to practice? And it's therefore important that we hold whoever signed up to these, the commitments that were made, and ensure that we create that enabling environment to support moving from rhetoric to action, because that's the only way we shall realize community-centered development and humanitarian response. That's the only way the local and national actors will take leadership in addressing the challenges that affect the communities that we serve, but also as local and national actors, because we are there at point of crisis. We are there post the crisis. We have a huge responsibility to account to the community that we serve and have high expectations from the local and national actors. So it's important that local leadership and the affected communities take a center stage in the HDP Nexus programming, like we discussed in this meeting.
Wow, wow, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I know you must have taken many lessons from RKSM. If you can share with us a few of them and how you are applying them to your work since last May.
Thank you again. One of the lessons we learned from the RSKM meeting was that the ideal team in general appreciated that localization works. A few years back, you wouldn't get local and national actors in such critical decision-making engagements. So that was a plus for me. This made this meeting a meeting unusual, or a meeting that was centering the affected persons and the local actors. And that makes RSKM a meeting unusual, or a practical meeting, and not the usual meetings that we have. That was one for me. A lot of talking on localization was shared, but also there was a general agreement that localization needs to take a center stage, practically speaking, for HDP Nexus programming to be successful. And that was also a plus for me. And also, I was in the panel of mapping and how it informs joint action planning, and how best can we synergize durable solutions or resilience building in our communities if we don't map and know where the actors, the various actors, right from community to the national levels are. So this was also critical for me, joint action planning, mapping rather, to inform joint action planning. It was a big takeaway for me. And then solutions, looking at solutions that build complementarity of the existing localization outcomes. So as we layer, how do we look at responses or design programs that enable adaptation and response beyond shocks? So these were my key takeaways from this meeting.
Wow, wow, thank you. Thank you so much. And we'll be coming back to you, and some of the audience might want to clarify some of those lessons that you have shared with us. Let me go to James, if I may. James, you participated in RKSM as a representative for USAID working at the mission in South Sudan. And as you remember, the meeting provided one country session each day where all participants working in a specific country had a chance to meet, discuss their learnings, and come up with a list of recommendations for how to advance HDP coherence in their country moving forward. South Sudan's list of recommendations included holding its own knowledge sharing meeting to gather partners in country for discussions about HDP coherence. We have heard that this has already happened successfully in South Sudan, and we are so delighted to have you here so that you can tell us more about this, what happened, and what was the outcome. And congratulations, by the way. It's very good news to hear what you've already done and are doing. James?
Thank you very much, Josh. It's good to see you again and good to see colleagues. I'm also happy to see colleagues actually in among the participants from South Sudan. So again, just a good participation from the South Sudan team. The knowledge sharing meeting was for us a critical event. It came at a time when we were actively engaged in discussions on how to transition our humanitarian funded multi-year emergency programs to development. So it was very timely, and we had a good show at the event in Naivasha. And it is one of those events you return home and you just don't want to let it sit in the shelves. So we returned home motivated more than ever to take forward our discussions and efforts on how to bring humanitarian programs and development and resilience program to working together. So I don't want to beat my chest too much and say that we have already succeeded in that, but I think we have registered some successes and we are continuing that engagement. So let me highlight a few things that we did, a chronology of things that we did upon returning to South Sudan. Number one is led by our program office in USAID Development, the USAID office in South Sudan, we convened all of the participants in the knowledge sharing meeting to review our participation, but also to agree a way forward. So that happened as soon as we got back, yes. And then we continued that discussion throughout June and July. That culminated into engagement of the USAID front office for the benefit of colleagues in the meeting here. USAID South Sudan does host quarterly meetings for all of its implementing partners. And there was one coming in August last year, and we requested to present our what we have brought home from the knowledge sharing meeting, and we were given the platform. And I must applaud up to now our colleagues from the national organizations who actually made excellent presentation in this all partner meeting. There was a turn-up of over 40 partners, and you can imagine it was a large crowd that keenly listened to the presentations from the learning, from the knowledge sharing meeting. I should say that we received a very positive feedback, and we're encouraged to forward with the plan that we had designed. We followed that with active discussions on how the humanitarian funded multi-year emergency programs can be transitioned to development program. And at this moment, this effort is still going, but I'm happy to say that at least, this number may sound small, but it is a significant one for us. We have been able to transfer about 1,500 of those humanitarian beneficiaries to development program. We are continuing to undertake consistently joint field monitoring trips. Here in South Sudan, we call them flyaways. So we go together, humanitarians and development colleagues, we go to visit programs in various locations to really identify practical opportunities for transition. As a matter of fact, one such flyaway is coming next week, and we will be participating in that. So the knowledge sharing meeting outcomes continue to be rolled in South Sudan. The other thing we have ensured that should happen here is to put the HDP as a regular and consistent agenda in the monthly meetings that are held by USAID's Resilience Advisory Working Group here in the mission. So every month when we sit around the table to talk about resilience, our actions from the knowledge sharing meeting are still continuing to be presented on the table and trying to see how we can roll those out. I think I should leave it there. I just want to conclude the question by saying that more than before, there is that interest, that they desire, that's renewed interest to ensure that HDP coherence is realized in South Sudan. Over.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Let me ask you one more question for now. You recall that one of the themes of RKSM was around how to sequence, layer, and integrate programming for collective impact. This theme is particularly relevant for you as the activity manager for the multi-year emergency programs in South Sudan. And if you can talk to us about how your learnings from RKSM and how you applied them to your efforts to sequence, layer, and integrate efforts. If you can share that with us, that would be helpful.
Thank you again, Josh, for that question. All of the colleagues that participated in the RKSM, the event identified three key aspects, including intentional focus on capacity building, which some of the previous colleagues already spoke to, enhanced conflict sensitivity analysis into planning, but also fostering collaboration as the key programmatic changes that needed to be made for HDP coherence. And to refresh the audience, the memory of audience here, our team, we had active discussions in Naivasha, and we agreed to come up with the takeaways that we identified, and those included underscoring the importance of peace, the P in the HDP, which somebody already earlier spoke about, and we identified also ensuring shock responsiveness given our context of South Sudan, where the situation is fluid. We looked at also cross-sectoral programming and longer-term assistance as the way out of the crisis and humanitarian response here. But we also looked at centering local knowledge and social inclusion. We included focusing on, emphasizing community-centered approaches to programming. And again, as I said earlier, trying to understand the context of South Sudan. At this point, I'm actually happy to say that, as I said earlier, we have a renewed interest to layer our activities with, and integrate our activities with the development offices to the extent possible. Again, this is a largely humanitarian country and a humanitarian context. So we try to actively look for opportunities to sequence, to layer, and to integrate our activities. The USAID South Sudan has a strategic plan in which kind of helped identify some or majority of the locations being program locations being those that also humanitarian programming happens. So transition kind of is easy to see, and that's why we're able to conduct field trips, because we're going to the same location to see both humanitarian and development program. And one such program is the resilience, South Sudan's resilience and through agriculture in South Sudan. We call it here as RAS, which is the one that we are working very closely to transition some of our activities. And in May, since May, we've been able to realize this, but it didn't happen as quickly as they should. We went through step-by-step process, including creating and participating in coordination bodies that have been created to discuss transition. We did maturity assessment of our activities for transition, and then we did field monitoring. And I should say that it's not always as simple as it sounds. We did experience, and we still do experience some challenges. And one of those is that the major one is that our popular multi-year emergency programs have come to an end. And so we are pressed with time to transition as much of those activities to development program. Thank you very much. Back to you, Josh.
Thank you so much. I want to ask one final question to each of the panelists about the next steps in your journey toward HDP coherence. And James, let me start with you. Tell us, you've already done a lot, but what are the next steps for you? Briefly, please.
So the next steps, what we are doing is we would like to, which is all part of our motivation to be in this meeting here today, is to really share our experiences and our knowledge and the challenges that we encountered in this HDP coherence efforts. So we have done that. Whenever there is an opportunity, we are happy to share our experiences, our knowledge on how we did it here. We are working with our development colleagues to document those successes through a success story document internal to us, so that we can have something on record for future programming. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Naomi, if I could come to you. Next steps.
Thank you. We have mapped 219 local and national actors in Uganda, and to inform our next steps in terms of joint action planning and in terms of centering the local and national actors in HDP Coherence. Uganda as a country, we have a functional steering group of signatories for localization that is chaired by the country director of CARE International. It still has 7 international non-government organizations out of the 68 that we have in Uganda, but we are celebrating each milestone. So we are happy to have CARE International in Uganda, Oxfam, World Vision, Catholic Relief Services, Save the Children, Gun Church Aid, get onto this board to commit towards supporting the localization agenda, which is great. We are experiencing an open door policy from USAID so that we harmonize thoughts in advancing the localization agenda, which is great. And we are in touch with the USAID localization advisor, who also informs, gives technical advice and gives us resources in terms of research, data. Resources don't have to just be money. The time, the technical expertise that you give to local and national actors is critical. We are participating in USAID's events that inform learning, and therefore change the perception that we had in Uganda that, oh, USAID, I won't waste my time. So we are working towards changing that. And as Charter for Change Working Group Uganda, we are part of the USAID Industry Day, where a lot of information was shared on how local and national actors can access resources that are of USAID. So there are great steps as far as Uganda is concerned, and harmonizing the localization thoughts on a collective way to move forward rather than a scattergun approach to the localization agenda as we move from rhetoric to action.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you so much. And now Kizito Fernando. Next steps for you.
Thanks again, Joshua, for the floor. Actually, for PDEC as a peace building program, the next step, as we've started doing the recitation session internally, we are thinking on how we can mitigate this asymmetric conflict context in which we are working. And throughout this asymmetric conflict context, we will be not only layering the crisis modifier to make sure that we engage more with government, because we understood that crisis modifiers wouldn't work without including the government and all the government for taking this the progress. But also what we want to take into account is keeping on collaborating with private sector for sustainability. The collaboration, the CLA approach, like collaborate, learning, and integrating, is as the key step that we are following throughout our program. We'll make sure that we keep on collaborating with private sector for food security, for common agenda, and to make sure that we are not duplicating action. So we believe that we are keeping on learning, and we should include all actors who are coming on our way to see how we can mitigate all the risk related to conflict around the National Park of Virunga, the reserve, the conflict that are running the wet reserve in Ituri, to make sure that there is no longer conflict in the region, because there are a lot of conflict around boundaries. And we are setting up kind of accountability session with local leaders to make sure that they can be the first to track our initiative to last long. That's basically what I can say. Thanks.
Thank you so much, and thank you, wonderful panelists. And in a moment, we'll be beginning to hear questions from the audience, and I want to remind our audience that we'll be reading your questions. So please go ahead and put questions if you haven't in the Q&A. Just before we do that, I want to introduce a special guest. He's actually been introduced, Dr. Dereje Wajira. He's the director of the IGAD Center for Pastoral Areas and Livestock Development, ICPALD. And Dr. Dereje, if you can please tell us about your experience at RKSM. You are very actively engaged there, also as a panelist, in addition to participating in many other ways. Why do you think it was important, and what changes do you hope to see as a result of convening partners in the Horn of Africa? Dr. Dereje.
Thank you very much, Joshua, for that introduction. Intergovernmental Authority on Development is a regional organization on Greater Horn of Africa that covers 8 countries, for those who are not familiar with it. We are very much privileged. We got this opportunity where really multiple partners, development partners, donors, government representatives, civil society, and other actors come together and discuss this specific topic. For the past 10 years, IGAD has been regionally coordinating resilience building in the Horn of Africa through the IGAD Drought Disaster Resilience Program. This is particularly because of 2 main reasons. Our vulnerability to climate change and climate shock and repeated impact of climate change, as well as also related with that is our vulnerability to conflict. The head of state and development partners sit and discuss to have really a mechanism by which they can continuously work together to build resilience. Now people are coming together to discuss and share a lesson specific to the topic that has been discussed last year, HDP. IGAD has the HDP program that cover 8 thematic areas, which range from the natural resource management, market, livelihood building, conflict, disaster risk management. We are part of the community. We have been doing it. We have been also learning. And then when people come together and discuss and share, learn from each other and reinforce, you do something in doubt, but when your colleagues are also struggling, you learn from each other. We have been hearing from Kizito or from Congo how they have been working on conflict sensitivity approach, peace building, but also learning how some of the development actors are allocating a special fund as contingency fund in case of crisis. It's good to hear from Naomi again how localization for people who have been there, who are there, who will be there, that localization, when it gets really voiced in that kind of event, it gives you confidence and go forward. No one has known, end to end. We all learn together as IGAD, as a regional convening entity. We are very much privileged to harness all this knowledge, creating, networking and people learning from each other. Going forward, there are a lot of to do this, and it's also in a way that burden sharing. The different partners come together, contribute ideas, as well as also share that responsibility of exchange. Going forward, we look forward to pick topic jointly and pick up and scrutinize and pick and going for learning. In our IGAD case, for example, we have a center working on conflict, a center working on pastoralism, one of the two programs since this learning, we have launched a Swedish-funded cross-border program along Uganda, South Sudan. The first thing we did is, detailed conflict analysis, because we don't want to trigger, we don't want to do harm. Previously, what we do is, as we implement, we also understand what's happening as conflict, but learning and what people are talking, how we have to really stop doing harm. Us has been a part of the process, us has been convening, but also us learning from this. So thank you very much, Joshua. I think that's what I want to say.
Wonderful, thank you so much. In fact, we have now entered the Q&A session, and let me start with you, Dr. Dereje, now that you have the mic. There's a question from one of the participants, and they say, pastoralism was one of the most talked about subtopics at the RKSM, linking climate change, gender and youth, and HDP coherence. So can you talk a bit about the RKSM takeaways for those who work in the pastoralist areas? So what would you see as the takeaways for those in pastoralist areas from RKSM?
Thank you very much, Joshua. I mean, that's a big convening, a lot of voice coming together. We have been working in pastoral sector for many years. They are transcending boundaries. Whatever action we are doing, there is a spillover effect, be it on boundary, across the country, across the community, and it needed coordination. And then what we have been talking about is really harmonized approach in cross-border area. Whether it is coming from this learning or previously, there is a lot of development supporters now approaching the pastoral development from cross-border perspective, because if you do something on one side of a border, not on the other side, you just aggravate the problem or trigger much more conflict. I can give you a particular example, the community CBCR, Community Cross-Border Community Resilience, funded by USAID, implemented by Chemonix, are working with a lot of civil society in cross-border areas. We have been facilitating discussions throughout the year in partnership with Chemonix, just to harmonize actions so that it's happening in synchronized manner. Similarly, European unions have picked this cross-border area for similar kind of investment. And World Bank, European Union's Africa Development Bank has prioritized borderland areas for investment in infrastructure as well as development. Why we are doing so is that the context of cross-border area and conflict are different from the interland. And that has happened because of people have really come together, reflected, and over years now it is very much been internalized. Joshua.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm sure there will be some other questions, but for now, let me come to Naomi. Naomi, there are two questions for you. One of them is, what are the roles of local actors, especially in refugees when it comes to humanitarian emergencies? And secondly, can you talk a bit about the challenges of making localization happen practically, and especially how do you go about holding actors accountable for engaging local actors in HDP programming? Over to you, Naomi.
Thank you. The first was challenges of making localization practical.
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. First of all, we already have an established framework globally in terms of the 8 commitments, which are straightforward, that several international actors already signed to it. And the commitments are partnership according to the UN non-government organizational principles, transparency, commitment of 25% of resources to local and national actors, promotion of local actors, support their aid. Now, holding them accountable for the signatures that they made in terms of a harmonized or collective advocacy. We have moved to these several signatories who are in the country. We appreciate that much as some of these discussions may be held at the global perspective, the country level offices may not be knowledgeable about these commitments. So our role is to extend this information to the country offices and say, hey, you're part of the signatories, for instance, to the Charter for Change, or you're part of the signatories to the Grand Bargain, which you have made at the global level. What are you doing at the country level? So sometimes it's as easy as that. And then asking for what you have signed to in terms of practicalities. We are looking for institutionalization of these commitments in the respective signatory country level offices. And it's sometimes as simple as sharing this information with the country level offices. And we have seen them get to action. 2, positive advocacy. Before I took on the C4C leadership, we were a bit radical, and we are now looking at the approach that we complement each other, and we are in this together. And then we also appreciate that systems and processes will not change at a go, but the process needs to get started. And we are celebrating each milestone by us having 7 signatories commit already to support in establishing a structure in the country as the C4C Secretariat is a plus. And those very signatories are now attracting other signatories. So complementarity in the collaboration towards achieving a common goal. 2, sharing the information about the commitments that respective signatories have signed. And 3, working towards putting in place mechanisms to build trust amongst the local and national actors. And also looking for the resources to ensure that we put in place mechanisms to build the trust. For instance, a Charter for Change Working Group Uganda currently, or last year, together with the coordinating INGO, International Non-Government Organization, and the 7 signatories that I talked about earlier, committed resources towards reviewing the quality assurance mechanisms, such that eventually we can do the quamming on the already over 170 local and national actors that belong to us. So we are working towards, much as we want to hold the signatories accountable, it's important that we balance the board. We also see that the local and national actors are also being accountable in their own way by ensuring that they sign the Charter for Accountability, get information from USAID, share it with the local and national actors so that they can become better stewards. So it's about collective and complementarity towards a common goal, because we are in this together. And at the end of the day, it's not about the signatory or the local actor, but it's about the affected community and the affected person, as it was emphasized in the regional knowledge sharing meeting.
Thank you so much. James, let me come to you. There's a question from Lisa Kwenenasfor. And the question is, can you say whether colleagues from other USAID missions have been inspired by what USAID South Sudan has done, convening actors locally to discuss the topics from HDP Coherence meeting? Do you know? Share with us.
Thank you. I I cannot speak very much for USAID partners, but for colleagues within the mission within USAID South Sudan, there is very active engagement picking up from the discussions that we brought home from the knowledge sharing meeting in Naivasha. So yes, there is active interest translating into some clear activities. That notwithstanding the fact that South Sudan generally is considered a humanitarian country, so the portfolios are not comparable. You have limited program sizes or scope of the development side, and then you have a huge humanitarian footprint. And frequently we have to talk about how we can work together to try to reduce the need for humanitarian assistance while elevating, promoting development programming. So the interest is there. And it has become actually more real when we are confronted with reduction in resources. Funding, particularly for FY24, has significantly gone down. And now we are at a territory where we have to do more with little. And it has made the discussions more worthwhile, actually. So yes, I feel like, yes, the team here is interested, but actually we have actually now been put in a corner where we have no choice except to discuss and come up with the practical activities and actions, given the continuously reduced funding, but also increase the humanitarian needs. So there are locations in the country which can be targeted for resilience, for development programming. And then there are locations that the humanitarian team has decided to focus resources there and allow resilience teams and development teams to focus on areas that are mature for those activities. So I am excited to be part of this conversation. And yes, I can confirm that there is interest here. We have come away from, I would say largely we have come away from, I don't know for the other countries, but we have come away from the more or less the blame game of humanitarians doing too much humanitarian work and kind of disempowering people to actually practical discussions like, okay, what actually can be done? What needs to be done to allow for that transition to take place? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Fernando, let me come to you. Of course, you work for the USAID's Partnership for Development of Eastern Congo, PDEC. So if you can share with us briefly, how do you embed conflict sensitivity approaches in your programming to not only mitigate conflict, but also strengthen social cohesion?
Thanks a lot, Joshua, again. For PDEC, actually for mitigating conflict, we organize dialogues. A very ambitious program that is working in 2 provinces, North Kivu and Ituri. And we have set up a group of more than 50 dialogue groups. And the dialogue groups, normally to mitigate conflict, they are working together throughout the conflict scan program. And the conflict scan program is linked to the early warning system that is related to the early warning response due to conflict. Secondly, throughout the social cohesion, we sit on the table with like CBOs and civil society organization to make sure that we can co-design specific solution related to specific problems. And for PDEC, co-design is the key step to make sure that we enter into partnership, to know that we are solving common problems and we are bringing common solutions throughout common investment. So it's like a co-investment approach. And this facilitates the cohesion between not only us as the NGOs, but also with local actors to trigger social change. The other step that we go through is to facilitate like accountability with leaders, local leaders. For us, it has been a great lesson to make sure that we are intervening in specific zones, yet leaders are not aware about our strategies. They are not aware about what we are doing. So throughout the accountability session, we are trying to discuss with them, hey, this is where we start. This is what we are doing. Do you think that we are on the good track or not? They can say, no, you have delay on this and this approach. And I will take an example of PDEC working on market system development, the market system approach for board, where we were working on an intervention on how we are protecting environment in Ituri around the reserve of Okapi, the water reserve of Okapi. The problem with this process was how we are solving the problem of access to electricity in Ituri. And it took us a little long time to decide on intervention. And local population started to, hey, we are making pressure on you. We want to strike because this intervention is delaying. Please, can you tell us what is blocking you from that intervention? Based on that alarm, we came to the community and say, hey, this is the story about this intervention. We are doing our best to make sure that we are bringing solution for electricity in your region. Please wait that we are on the way, but give us at least 1 or 2 months so that we may solve this problem. And this is how we are doing things differently, apart from what we've been doing in the past. You know, the free reason that PDEC was created was to see how we can do differently from all other NGOs that have been doing in the Eastern Zone. USAID has invested a lot of money in East Zone, but they're saying there is no enough change because we are like turning in the cycle. So what are we doing differently from this adaptation? So PDEC is a great program of Nexus for resilience, and we have brought in the mind of local population that all NGOs that are coming, they should be asked for accountability. They shouldn't come in your region and maybe use your knowledge, maybe use your time and whatever, but they are taking a lot from resources like funding and whatever. So this is how we are trying to make a kind of cohesion to mitigate conflict. You know, as I said before, all the local population believe, not only think, but they believe that NGOs are supporting rebels in the Eastern Zone. This is like rumors are spreading in the Eastern Zone, and all the humanitarian are like in high risk. So if you are not accountable to them, maybe they can attack you in your vehicle, they can attack you on the ground. So this is very easy for us to make a connection between what we are doing and the local communities are aware about this. And they are supporting us throughout the conflict scan mechanism to make sure that this is very easy for us to move forward. Thanks, Joshua.
Thank you so much. Let me come to Naomi. Naomi, a question from Juma Afidra, and he says, Naomi, good to know you are engaged with the USAID localization office. The HDP localization seems not well pronounced in Uganda. With your localization actor mapping experience, do you think the local actors are ready to lead responses in humanitarian space?
Thank you. They are not only ready to lead responses, they are already leading responses in humanitarian crises in Uganda. There are many organizations, for instance, in the hotspot areas of West Nile, we have CFOD, a local organization that is leading, supporting in consortium with Dan Church. We have several local and national actors already leading. What we are advocating for is an increased number of local and national actors taking leadership on this, but also funding, because research is showing much as the global commitments were 25% of resources going to local and national actors. We are seeing in Uganda, the 2022 research showed that to date, by 2022, 8% of resources were going directly to the local actors. So these are the indicators that we are tracking. But also we are in dialogue. Like I said, we are collaborating for us to understand each other. And as we collaborate, there is more space opening up for more local and national actors to take leadership in this, while we invest in ensuring that we have a structure, a framework to operationalize the localization indicators, but also we are organized and have data, like it was emphasized in this meeting, that can be relied on, and also have a mechanism for checking the quality of local and national actors. And majorly, we are now centering on the quality QAM, or abbreviated as QAM, but it is quality assurance mechanism that research was done on, it was reviewed, and we now have the report ready. So that's how we are doing it.
Okay, Naomi, let me ask you two more brief questions and brief answers. The one is from Voranisoa. I may not pronounce the name correctly. What are these mechanisms that you intend to establish to build trust between organizations in the platform? And from Dubale, he asks the question, what mechanism, I think the question is, just give me a second, it has left my, okay, what mechanisms do you have you tested working to incentivize local organizations to accountability? I hope you got those two questions. Okay.
Yes, please. Thank you, Dr. Joshua. That mechanisms, like I already said, one, we have a central place to operationalize the localization indicators. And that is the Charter for Change Secretariat. And it has been established because we have commitment in terms of technical support, in terms of resources from the 7 organizations, international organizations that I talked about. 2, we have reviewed with the resources that we have at the Secretariat, we have reviewed the quality assurance mechanisms. That was last year, and we have a report produced this year. Our target roadmap for 2024 is to disseminate this report, but also start effecting these quality assurance mechanism indicators onto the 7 local national actors that we have as endorsers of Charter for Change. And then providing a platform for learning and unlearning, particularly for the local and national actors. And then Dubali, what mechanisms do we have for accountability? One, we have bi-monthly engagements with local and national actors to share information and knowledge on what it means, first of all, to be accountable, but then what it takes for you to carry on with accountability. That is 1. 2, sharing information on donor rules and regulations so that they appreciate and get to do the accountability like it is required. And 3, we have worked with the Internal Risk Management Group of Uganda that has almost 68 international organizations in Uganda. So as local actors, we may not have been able to reach out to them, but through the steering group that we are working with, that is composed of basically international organizations, we have had regional leaderships trained on internal risk management. Our expectation is that this knowledge is cascaded to their respective regions so that we strengthen accountability mechanisms. Over to you.
Wonderful, thank you, thank you. James, let me ask a question from your USAID colleague, Juma Fidler. And he says, James, thank you for sharing your interesting story. I remember you did the same in the BHA OA annual retreat. Can you further explain the successful pathways of transitioning participants from humanitarian landscape to development? Did I hear well that only 1,500 people moved out of humanitarian assistance to development program? James.
Thank you very much, Josh. And yes, thank you, Juma. I remember we were together in this event you just described. So nice to hear from you again. So the 1,000, I should have clarified. Let me start by clarifying the numbers. The 1,500 that I talked about, these are just beneficiaries of one activity, one little activity in a project. The other discussions are still ongoing. And the way that we did it here is one, we've held several roundtables with humanitarian partners together with the development teams, development partners. We put them around the same table and we brainstorm on this roundtable on what are the activities that either side is implementing and which are the activities that, and when they end, and how, as many of you will know, for proposal developers, there is always a section for transition and exit. And for us, transition and exit strategy in a proposal is just no longer just to tick the box. It is something that we follow through to make sure that you said at the end of the program, this is how you're going to transition out and this is how you're going to exit as a humanitarian. And frequently we see that the transition plan is to hand it over to a development program. So we actualize those discussions through roundtable discussions with both development and humanitarian partners. Number two, we do have what we call backbone coordination platform here. It is a platform funded by USAID through a partner to bring development and humanitarian partners together to coordinate the activities, not only in the capital in Juba, but also in the field and in project locations where activities are being implemented. And then we also commissioned the maturity assessment, which means a team of evaluators, monitors, to go to specific places to check the status of groups of beneficiaries or individual project participants, and they develop a criteria to check the extent to which project participants have matured from when they enrolled into a program to when the program is ended, and make a determination whether these individuals can actually be transitioned to development program, can be taken off the humanitarian assistance list. And then, of course, the so many meetings that we have, monthly coordination meetings, and kind of keep the discussion on transition very vibrant. Like I said in the beginning, I'm not yet at a stage where I should beat my chest and say we've succeeded, but I just wanted to mention that 1,500 as an example that things can actually happen when there is interest and when there is commitment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me come to Dr. Dereje. Dr. Dereje, you mentioned that IGAD has a membership from 8 countries in the Horn of Africa region. And of course, we know that the Horn of Africa region has faced many recurrent crises. The question to you, if you can briefly respond to this, why is implementing HDP coherence initiatives in cross-border regions such a challenge? And what are some of the successes that you are seeing as you work in IGAD?
Thank you very much, Joshua. I think one of the key challenge in implementing cross-border area is to get a donor who is interested in both sides of the border. If we are talking about 2 countries or in 4 or 3 border areas. And the biggest challenge, because those communities are very much interdependent, they share the resource they have, they are more or less the same community. But also when bad situation happen, they also share, and there is a spillover effect. So I can take a case for South Sudan. It's very difficult to attract funding for South Sudan in Karamoja cluster. You could do a lot in Uganda, in Ethiopia, in Kenya, but something that's not happening in South Sudan equally will affect the other 3 countries. And that's one of the challenge we have in terms of implementation in cross-border area. But we are also continuously vocal about the impact, multiplying things by 0. I can give you a particular example for if you are working on controlling transboundary animal disease, you work in 2 countries where 4 countries are bordering each other. You could go and the same problem persists. And that's what we are really bringing and synchronizing. Synchronizing is not must with the same donor, but also, as we are saying, HDP, it doesn't mean that each organization will specialize in everything. Let's have a coherence, development actors, humanitarian actors, peace actors, have harmonized and read each other in terms of who is doing what, so that we complement each other and support each other. And that's what we are advocating. That's what we are pushing for, and things are slowly getting better. Thank you very much, Joshua.
Very good, very good. Thank you. Kizito, we have less than 2 minutes remaining. In fact, just a little over 1.5 minutes. Very briefly, it's a question from Veronique Pras here. How does Mercy Corps in Ituri deal with all the different armed groups? It is very complex and challenging. I would guess it is hard for the different population groups to have common goals. So what can you say in 1.5 minutes?
Yeah, yes, it is. It's really, really very challenging working in Ituri. And the question as it is addressed, dealing with armed group, it's not as easy as you can think. But there is a group that's called ADF, the Alliance Defense Force, that is very, very bloody, and no one can approach it. So dealing with such a group is very, very complicated. But there are at least the group like Mai Mai, is not very bloody like you can see. They are living in the community. They can participate in some of the dialogues that PDEC or Mercy Corps is organizing in this program. So to be true and saying it, all the armed groups have no common goals, because there are armed groups that are really searching for minerals, such as Ituri. Others are now involved in coffee and cocoa. That's very, very tricky. And the key role that Mercy Corps is playing is to see how we are working together with the government to put in place a transparency platform that will be working on traceability of cocoa crops. And this will mitigate at least the theft of crops in the fields. But to stop all the blood of selecting or recruiting all the youth in the armed group, Mercy Corps is now working with a very huge number of youth to make sure that they can get substitute jobs throughout creating entrepreneurship, starting a job, a business, and something like that, to make sure that they are not joining the armed group. So this is the key role that we are playing in Eastern Zone, but it's very challenging working here, truly, very challenging. And yeah, this is the situation, but we are doing our best. I think we have been successful based on some success stories based on what we are bringing in the community. At least some at-risk youth who have been at risk in joining armed group may say, hey, I am no longer interested in joining such group. I can now start my business. We have some kind of success story like that. But there is a long way to go. I think Mexico is now starting a new other program that's called BACS that will be now targeting at least all the problems of armed group, because PDEC has no intervention with directly the armed group, but the BACS program will be at least touching armed group to see how we can bring in a great solution. So that's all what I can say. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you very much, panelists and the audience for asking those questions. Back to Suzanne.
Thank you, Joshua, and let me add my thanks to you for doing such a great job moderating the panel, and to our panelists. So you'll see now in the chat, we'll share an evaluation. We'd love to hear from you about how this session went, your suggestions for the future, because we do have 3 other webinars upcoming in our series on HDP coherence and practice insights from the implementing community. And we invite you to register for those upcoming events. They're highlighting different publications that we have, different studies that we're doing, and we'll get to hear a little bit more during those events. To hear more about the RKSM, the regional knowledge sharing meeting that our wonderful panelists were talking about today, we have published a report. In that you can watch the 3 different panel discussions that we have. We have links to those. You can see the key takeaways from the different sessions that we had. And our panelists were talking about the different recommendations that came out from their country sessions. You can see the recommendations from the 6 countries that were represented in that Greater Horn of Africa RKSM, all in that report. So we thank you very much for joining us. And again, help us to make the other sessions in our series as effective and impactful as possible by filling out that survey. And we look forward to you joining us in the upcoming webinars. Thank you all.